Well, the sausage making of American diplomacy typically takes place behind the scenes. It's typically just adjacent to the Oval Office in the cabinet room where you have the tough conversations and then the united front or the tea leaves are delivered in front of cameras in the Oval. And we are left to discern whether it was a good or a bad meeting. But you just saw live the sausage making of American diplomacy in the Oval Office before all of our eyes. It is 5 years, 7 months, and 4 days from the first time these two men spoke. And during that very first conversation, Zelenskyy said he had a lot to learn from President Trump. He, in fact, said, "You are a great teacher for us, and you can teach us how to drain the swamp." I think it's fair to say we are a long way from that moment many years ago. Some context that I think you all need to know of things that have been going on behind the scenes that kind of have led to this acrimony. There have been several flashpoints in this relationship, one of which was February 12th, where President Trump accused Zelenskyy of oversleeping for a meeting with the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. He felt that was disrespectful. Not only that, Secretary of State Marco Rubio had this to say: Trump is very upset with Zelenskyy. Biden was very upset with Zelenskyy. I am very upset with Zelenskyy. Zelenskyy told Vance and me he is okay with the deal, but then later publicly said he rejected the deal. You know, Steve, as I look at all of this, and we saw kind of this transpire into what was a caustic back and forth, the impetus for it, I think, was very important. Right. They were having a nice conversation, and then you had J.D. Vance speak, and then you had Zelenskyy talk about what kind of diplomacy are you talking about, and take on this accusatory tone towards the vice president, from which the vice president said, you should be coming in here being very thankful. We have given you $183 billion, and you come to the Oval Office with this.
Kayleigh, you're exactly right to set it up the way you did. We have never seen anything like that before, where it actually played out in real time. Usually, you know, they'll come out and they'll say, okay, we had a disagreement, but we actually got to see the disagreement. If I had to guess, you know, for Mr. Zelenskyy at one point essentially blamed Trump, Obama, and Biden as well. You guys never stopped him when you had the chance. Okay, that's not smart to do. Hey, Donald Trump, you had the chance and you blew it, essentially, is what he was doing. For a while, it kind of seemed to me like J.D. Vance and Trump were playing good cop, bad cop, where Trump was being the diplomat, and then J.D. Vance said, you know, say thank you. And eventually, Mr. Zelenskyy wound up arguing a lot and then groveling. Ultimately, this could be a lot like what we saw just a week ago, where Donald Trump referred to him as a dictator and a third-rate comedian and stuff like that, to get a better deal for the United States. For him to have an argument on television in front of the whole world, suddenly the whole world's going like, okay, Trump won that. Zelensky's going to have to do something.
I think that's such a good point, Emily. You know, the American public, we've seen, you know, kind of question, we're giving $183 billion in aid, and there are questions that come with that kind of money going to Ukraine. And, you know, you would think that Zelenskyy coming in would be very grateful in front of cameras, certainly, for that. And instead, you know, we had this moment where he challenged the vice president. And the context I mentioned, I do want to bring it up just so our viewers can see. This is from Axios, and this describes that meeting that I think kind of is a huge part of the souring of this relationship. February 12th, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent met Zelenskyy in Kyiv to offer a proposal that would give the U.S. access to Ukrainian mineral rights in return for de facto U.S. protection. Trump later told reporters Zelenskyy was rude and delayed his meeting with Bessent because he slept in. That's not the posture that I think a power would ordinarily take when given aid. I mentioned I was in the meeting with the Iraqi prime minister. And what you saw was a very mutual respect relationship between someone who'd received U.S. taxpayer aid and someone who was grateful for it and wanted to work with our country.
And I think the presence of cameras casts an entire dimension on this that is very important in the realm of diplomacy. So what we saw there is a president that has been exhausted by Putin's continued invasions of his country, right? But he is ascribing the failure to deter on the current administration with 2 administrations past. And I have only compassion for him and his people. And I can't imagine the exhaustion and rage that he must feel. But Vice President Vance was absolutely apt when saying, you should not be litigating this in front of the American media. And the point of diplomacy, which President Zelenskyy was asking about, which was essentially like, look, you guys, I don't trust your deal right now because we've gone through deals and it hasn't worked. Now, President and Vice President Vance are saying, look, there is a new sheriff in town. So you have to believe us. And I think under the auspices of, and you are currently in the American Oval Office in front of the American President, Commander-in-Chief, and his Vice President, and in front of the American media. And Vice President Vance pointing out, you have gone on a media, public press, public relations tour that has subverted a lot of our policies. So I think what we're seeing is someone who is totally at their wits' end, Zelenskyy, but taking it out in ways that is deeply damaging to the fragility and the importance of diplomacy with the current administration that has done everything it can to support and will continue to, while under the value system of America first. So I was deeply disappointed by this exchange just because it seems so stressful. And this also goes to show, for all of those headlines that crow about how easy it is for President Trump's job, it is not. It is an incredibly hard position for a commander-in-chief to inherit what happened before them and make good decisions. So bravo, President Trump and Vice President Vance.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a fact that is inescapable, Tommy, and it is that Putin went in under Obama's watch, and Putin went in under Biden's watch, and there was a 4-year hiatus, and that happened to be the 4 years of President Trump. So when President Trump says he might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, but he hasn't broken them with me, there's facts to prove that.
And I think President Trump was rightfully insulted by the way President Zelenskyy has been acting for years now. Don't bite the hand that feeds you is essentially what I got out of all of that. Trump repeatedly said, you don't have the cards, you don't have the cards. And it was like a father swatting down their toddler who repeatedly has their hand out asking for allowance but doesn't want to mow the lawn. What he's saying is, we want to help you, but the way that you have paraded yourself in front of media for years, Hollywood audiences, in the fanfare on Vogue covers, the way you have this sense of entitlement as you ask us for money and guarantees. Now I'm trying to give you a deal that's good for my people and good for your people, and you're disrespectful. And so, whereas you didn't like that exchange, I loved it because that told me America is back. This is the president of the United States of America, and he's going to act like it. And repeatedly through there, it seemed as though Zelenskyy had his arms crossed like a toddler. You're not going to act like that with President Trump. Maybe a President Biden, but not with this administration and not with this country. I loved watching this play out in front of us.
And, you know, Jerry, we as, you know, as Americans, as voters, we only get tea leaves that we pick up on. We get reporting from sources inside meetings. And one item that I picked up on that I couldn't get out of my mind was when Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Biden would call and yell at Zelenskyy. And he referenced reporting that the Biden administration would give this aid, and then Zelenskyy would go out publicly and say, the Americans aren't giving me X, Y, or Z. There was this attitude of ungratefulness that it seems like also proliferated during the Biden years, according to the tea leaves referenced by Rubio.
You know, and because of that, I agree with Tommy here. I'm glad to see this made public. I think it's fantastic. Now you understand what we're up against. Now you know what we see in the public arena, in the private arena, usually. You know, we're getting a lot of pushback. That's the way it's working. I think a lot of Americans, particularly on the left, think we can get done whatever. We have enough money. We have enough macho. We have what? No, it's hard. It takes a lot. And you're seeing that right now. And you saw the president, you know, put him in his place. Tommy, you said something before we even came to air about Zelenskyy not wearing a suit.
Yeah.
He's just not showing any respect, period.
Yeah, you know, Steve, I guess I would call it the $1 million question, but that seems like small ball. So I'm going to call it the $183 billion question. That's the amount of U.S. aid given to Ukraine, is whether this rare earth minerals deal gets signed. At the top of this, which we didn't show you, President Trump said it'd be signed at 1 p.m. Well, that is in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And it's hard to imagine these two guys sitting down and inking a deal in 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Because during the bilateral press conference where both sides are together, they're going, okay, you asked 2 questions, you asked 2 questions. Those 2 questions on each side would be, so when the cameras went away, who wanted to strangle each other? Because obviously it did not go well. Remember, ultimately, Zelenskyy wanted this meeting because he wanted security guarantees from the United States of America. He's not going to get them because Trump has even said, I'm not going to talk about that until a peace deal is signed. And it's probably not going to be a peace deal today. It's going to be a stuff deal for rare earth and stuff like that. If I was Donald Trump, every time I have a world leader that I got a problem with in the Oval Office, bring in the cameras. You know what? Let's just go ahead and talk about it. Forget about the smoke-filled rooms. I think after decades of being told what happened, and then years later, we find out, well, it wasn't exactly like this. There's no disputing what we just saw. And not only is that good television, as Donald Trump said, but it's really good for the American people to see what is going on behind the scenes.
Right.
And Emily, in just a few moments here, the role of Vice President J.D. Vance is interesting. He went on the world stage. He challenged Europe. He challenged them on free speech. He got a ton of criticism in the so-called mainstream media, but he got a lot of accolades from a lot of Americans saying he's saying it how it is. And J.D. Vance was the touchstone once again, kind of saying it like it is and challenging Zelenskyy.
And he's a veteran.
Yeah.
So this is someone who's coming into the Oval Office as the vice president and sitting, across from a current president who, with his attire and with his demeanor, seeks to remind everyone that he's currently in war. And he's sitting across from someone who knows exactly what that was like. So I think that, too, we've talked about this, that his relationship with the Senate, his relationship with the Hill, but his relationship as well in that front, I think does well to say, you have to remember who you're talking to this time around, sir, meaning this administration.
Yeah. Well, the last 4 years, the presidential press conference was rare. The questions and the freewheeling with President Biden was rare. But you just saw American diplomacy play out in a way I don't think we have seen, certainly in modern history. And now the overarching question as we approach the 1 p.m. hour, just a few seconds from now, is the rare earth mineral actually going to be signed? We will wait and see. And tonight on Special Report, now you can't miss it. Bret Baier is sitting down with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy after that very tense exchange between him and President Trump. Do not miss it. The news continues.